Thank you, Angela. I'm Dr. Bogard, and I'm representing Bogard Health and Wellness. Originally, I was trained as an anesthesiologist and had a very traditional background. As I started to age and enter menopause, I was struggling with some medical problems. And to be honest with you, I really couldn't find any help with my primary care doc, or just really approaching it from a traditional standpoint, and ended up seeking someone that was trained in healthy aging. And after working with them for a couple years and seeing the benefits, I ended up, as a physician, I kept reading and studying and deciding that I needed to do the training myself. So I went ahead and did the fellowship through the American Academy of Anti-Aging and set up a practice a couple years ago. It'll be 2 years this coming March. And I'm actually retiring from anesthesia at the end of the year to do my healthy aging practice full time now. And it's been very gratifying. I have improved, turned around, and really helped a number of men and women in this area. And I have patients that really have come from all over. I have some from Southern California, and I actually have some in Florida and New York and all over. So when you come to my practice, what I like to focus on is that it's very individualized. The first visit that I have is about an hour and a half. I sit down and draw your blood and then do a full history and physical. And then once the lab comes back, I spend another hour following up. I'm always available by phone and email. My patients know how to get a hold of me if they have questions. This is you're 57 years old. I'd like to get that down a bit. So what I offer are bioidentical hormones, both topical, and then I went on to get the pellet training. So bioidentical hormones can actually look like, it's like a little rice kernel, and you can implant them in your hip, and they last about 4 to 6 months. And that's another alternative to hormone replacement. I do thyroid and adrenal hormone evaluation. I do an advanced cardiovascular evaluation. I look at your metabolic health. I do nutrient and amino acid evaluations and neurological health evaluations. I look for environmental toxins and do a lot of work to help you heal your gut. So again, I draw the lab, and from a cardiovascular standpoint, most of the time when you go to the doctor, you get your total cholesterol, your LDL, your HDL, and your triglycerides. And as you can see, that's just the tip of the iceberg. When I was in med school, they taught us that there were 5 risk factors for cardiovascular disease. There's actually about 200. So that's the rest of what we try to measure here. So the lab that I go ahead and I draw the lab and send it off. Currently I'm using a few different labs, but primarily I use one called HDL. And the advantage that I will tell you of this is there's actually no out-of-pocket expense. I've got several Kaiser patients that come to me, and HDL doesn't balance bill them. So the information you get is this much, and there's no out-of-pocket expense for the lab. So the goal is green. We want everything that's in red is an alert, and those are things that I instruct you, help you to work on. HDL, again, we look at the LDL and the HDL. The HDL is the healthy cholesterol. The LDL is the lousy cholesterol. So then what we do is we break it down. Your LDL, we don't want little tiny things. So this is, I'll show you with so the LDL, what we want are big buoyant LDLs opposed to little things. It's the little things that actually sneak across the blood vessel wall and create the plaque. And again, the HDL is the cleanup, but what we do is actually break it down to make sure that you've got healthy LDL as opposed to unhealthy HDL. And then there's some specialty lipoproteins that actually increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. There's something called an ApoB lipoprotein. It's like a little key that attaches to the LDL and pulls it through the blood vessel wall. And then again, we break down the HDL into its components. The ApoA1 and the HDL2 are the really good HDL cleaners, and we make sure you've got enough of those. And then there's something called the Lp(a). It's like a little corkscrew that wraps around the LDL and it makes it more thrombogenic. This is an inherited trait, not a lifestyle trait. And so again, I show you different ways to lower your Lp(a). So I pull it all together and make recommendations to show you how to lower your risk of cardiovascular disease. One of the big things I do is work on your lifestyle. And I can show you that eating sugar, starch, saturated fats are what really increases your cardiovascular risk. There are some genetic biomarkers that increase your risk. One of them is called something called an apolipoprotein E. And if you have an E4 from either your mother or your father, your increased risk, you have a high risk of heart disease and a high risk of Alzheimer's. And there are some things, again, that we can do from a lifestyle standpoint, from a supplement standpoint, from a pharmacology standpoint that can decrease this risk. Inflammation is really at the root of almost every disease. If we look at hypertension, cardiovascular disease, dementia, autoimmune disease, cancer, each one of them, if you look on a cellular level, starts with inflammation. So I measure inflammatory markers. And I can link some of the markers that actually increase your risk. This is problems linked to sleep apnea. As an anesthesiologist, I was very familiar with sleep apnea. And I can, first of all, look at your airways, but also, make recommendations. Sleep apnea itself decreases basically takes years off your life. And by looking at our inflammatory markers and our stress cardiac markers, we can determine if you're at risk for sleep apnea. And then we look for markers that show if there's any pre-diabetes. And again, stopping diabetes in the infant stages as opposed to letting it go on to full-blown disease is much more suggestive. It's very helpful. Now, as far as the hormones, what I do is I do a lot of teaching to kind of explain why we put you on bioidentical hormones. First of all, estrogen. Estrogen itself protects your heart, your brain, your blood vessels, your bones, and your skin. Women that have estrogen just age much more gracefully than women without estrogen. There's a lot of questions, and I can get into it, with questions, but basically a lot of the fears are based on the old studies, which are with synthetic estrogens as opposed to the bioidentical estrogens. And I can answer questions on those. Progesterone has a calming effect. That's why we dose it at night to help you sleep. And testosterone helps maintain your muscle and muscle mass and keeps your energy and libido up. And DHEA helps maintain your immune system and helps enhance energy level, libido, memory, and your immune system. And cortisol is the only hormone that actually increases as you age, and we don't want it to increase. So there are a lot of things we can do to help you keep your cortisol down too. Thyroid, the way that I was taught was that you measure your TSH, and if your TSH is fine, then there's no degree of hypothyroidism. What I've learned from this is if you just rely on your TSH, you're going to miss about 80% of the people that are hypothyroid. So what I do is I measure the whole thyroid cascade from all the way from the hypothalamus all the way down to the thyroid and then to the body. And I look and measure, so we measure the TSH, the T4 free and total, the T3 free and total, and thyroid antibodies. And that shows the whole cascade and how and what's going on. So as I mentioned, I do the hormone replacement both with transdermal creams and pellets. I'm a little partial to the pellets after being on the creams for a few years and then actually going to the pellets. It keeps you in a real steady state. And this is an idea of the evaluation that we do and recommendations. A lot of genetic markers that I look at. There's something called, I don't know if you guys are familiar with something called a methylating gene. But basically, it's a genetic marker that increases, again, your risk of other diseases like cardiovascular disease, dementia, some mental disorders, cancer, diabetes. And through a simple blood test, we can find if you have any defect in your methylating ability, and we can help you with that. So again, the idea is a healthy age. As you age, so you start, in your 20s and 30s, and your age is it's optimal. And then by the time you get to your 40s, your age starts to decline, and then 50s, it declines a little bit more, and 60s. And most of us, by the time we're in our 70s and 80s, our health we're spending most of the time going to the doctors. The whole idea is to stop that decline or slow that decline. I always tell people I may not help you live longer, but hopefully the quality of your life during that time can be much better. So he says, we all have busy schedules, Mr. Murdoch, but you need to plan for either 1 hour of exercise a day or 24 hours of being dead. Thank you.